Good morning. This is Eric Rollins, the Constitutionalist, here on 1550 KXEX, the best talk in town. I've been thinking about this show for a while, and I'm kind of excited to talk about free speech. Can free speech survive without the First Amendment? And with the rise of authoritarianism, not just in our country, look at Trudeau. Look at what has happened with French's President Macron. Look at what's happening with the head of the EU. They're telling people, well, no, you can't fertilize. No, you can't say that. In England, there's laws about you can't online say certain things because they believe that speech is violence. And that seems to be a trend of the left, that speech is violence. So I kind of wanted to just go to Wikipedia, which is kind of the left's version of what they would call free speech. So here's their definition. What is real freedom of speech? Freedom of speech is a principle that supports the freedom of an individual or a community to articulate their opinions and ideas without fear of retaliation, woke culture, censorship, collusion between big tech and our government, or legal sanction. So that's the left's perspective. I wonder if they actually believe it, because their actions tell me they don't. There's been a whole lot of collusion. But I want to start with somebody that I think is one of the most brilliant men that has ever lived, Albert Einstein. I got a quote from him. Blind belief in authority is the greatest enemy of the truth. Now, that's kind of profound to me. We're supposed to just listen and believe what all of the various traditional media sources tell us. But what we found is not only do they tell their side of the story and then they pretend like they're not biased. Oh yeah, this is the facts. Well, I'm going to tell you right now, I'm biased. I'm conservative. I have a definite perspective, but I try to bring light and truth, and you get to hear my opinion. Now, could I be wrong? I suppose it's possible. What I find is I'm generally not, but I guess that's because, to be on radio, you must have a reasonable size ego. So, the First Amendment has become a target of the left because they don't really want to engage in the arena of ideas. Instead, what they're focused on is power and control. Now, that's a big deal. They're focused on power and control, and a whole lot of the progressive left doesn't seem to think that there's any reason why, or any rule, any social mores that can't be broken, because to them the end justifies the means. Now, I'm going to start with big tech. Big tech is like Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. They're all exempt from lawsuits. So, for instance, there would be some people that teach the Constitution that would argue that only the government can censor free speech. Well, if the government has given a pass so that if big tech does something that steps on your free speech and they can't be sued, like in a normal court of law, they have an exemption, then I would argue that they very much stepped in. So the government is involved. If they had not done that, and let's say big tech, you could either choose to not use them, or, and let's face it, in a lot of ways, Facebook, Twitter, etc. have become the new town square, the new way to put out your ideas and your opinions. And so if the government's involved in that, and we thought that the only way they were involved up till fairly recently, conservatives suspected, because for instance, I have on more than one occasion posted opinions with no commentary, zero commentary, from the equivalent of the CDC from England. They're saying things different than what flip-flop Fauci says. Or I've posted things from Germany, again, from the equivalent of their CDC, that talk about adverse events that have to do with the jab. Notice I'm not even calling it the full thing, because our cowardly, spineless bastards have decided that censorship is the way to go. And I don't want to be censored. I want people to actually hear this. But I've posted those things, and I've been censored for that. Now, that sounds relatively harmless if we're talking about corporations that are just kind of, here's the terms of contract, terms of service, and like it or don't like it. But all of a sudden, we're starting to find out with all these Twitter releases that government is absolutely connected. Some examples of that. King Newsom, here in Gavanswala, where we sit right at this moment, absolutely has reached out and said, well, you can't say that. And he's reached out to big tech and said, you can't say that. So they've exerted pressure on big tech. Our Secretary of State has reached out and said, oh no, that's misinformation. They did it with a Judicial Watch video. Judicial Watch, by the way, would probably be the #1 expert on elections. Judicial Watch took them to court and unanimously won against our Secretary of State. That either tells me she's not very bright, or the end justifies the means, or they're not mutually exclusive. But the big one is that brought light to all this is what happened with Hunter Biden. Now, Hunter Biden is not the important part of this. Who cares? He's some drugged out idiot that likes to film things. The big deal is he got significant big money jobs from foreign governments when he had zero qualifications. Now, how would he get those? Makes you wonder. It's also very interesting that he decided to refer to his dad, Bumblin' Biden, as the big guy, and that he got 10%. Now, there is one of the big deals in all this, of the information of the Hunter Biden series. The big deal is the big guy. So does that mean that he's bought off? Sure makes me think so. All evidence points in that direction. The other big deal is the suppression of the story. And apparently that happened all over. It wasn't alone. It was like there was collusion between all of the traditional media sources, the FBI, the Biden team. They were not elected at that point, all putting pressure on big tech. In addition, the FBI had their own former lawyer at Twitter, James Baker, and he was trying to delete all involvement, basically to hide all connection between Twitter and the FBI. Now, thank goodness, Elon Musk has decided that he needs to release that. Now, in response, it's interesting that places like CNN, fake news. I don't know that you can actually say CNN without saying fake news. They are intimately connected. But, they're not alone. MSNBC, all of these traditional media sources have suppressed the story. Yep, they have suppressed the story. And not only by not talking about it, but by talking about how Musk is unfair and how a billionaire should not be in control of this. Well, what about the other billionaire that controls the Washington Post? What about the fact that George Soros is far and away the largest donor to the Democratic Party, and he doesn't seem to ever donate any money to the Republicans, even though I consider some of them to be weak, spineless, liberal, part of the deep state. He didn't even donate money to those Republicans. So, billionaires clearly have a say. So what do we do? That's a big issue. What do we do? Where do we go? Well, I want to point out that since 2008, traditional media has lost about half of the jobs it had. CNN at this point is lucky to get 500,000 viewers for a show, for a big show, for a popular show. Well, I know all kinds of podcasters that get that. What we do is we find alternative sources. We find people we trust, and we get to hear their perspective that won't lie to you and go, oh no, this is the straight news. These are the facts. Well, I'll give you facts. I'll also give you my opinion. Fact is, legacy media has severely lost viewership. And I think that has to do with the fact that they've gone with this idea of advocacy journalism. So advocacy journalism is essentially you tell a narrative. Instead of reporting the story and giving facts, we're moving from a place where we want a particular result, and how do we spin the story so that we get the result we want? Except they're lying to you in that they're not saying this is opinion, they're saying this is fact. So there's collusion. As far back as, in my memory, the early 90s, when I was listening to Rush Limbaugh, though I started listening in the 80s, but I didn't notice this till the 90s. There would be a particular term, a particular way of saying something, and then you go to every bit of the legacy media and they were repeating it in the same way. Collusion? Liberal hive mind? Sheep? Hard to say. Interesting that many people would come with the same conclusion, have to say it the same way. You heard the same thing with the Russia collusion, which was completely proved to not be true, but we didn't find that out. Not till later. That plagued Trump the whole time. And then people like Adam Schiff that swore. Now, by the way, he's in Congress. He's a slime ball. He's one of the things that's wrong with Congress. Happens to be a Democrat, though I don't think that the only bad people in Congress are Democrats. You know, Mitch McConnell, shame on the turtle. Anyway, it really bothers me that people like Adam Schiff could consistently lie. I guess that's the First Amendment, but he was also allowed to sit on serious committees. Now, I'm hoping, we'll see, I'm hoping that Kevin McCarthy will remove him. He said he's going to. He said he's also going to remove the anti-Semite from the squad from Minnesota, the Ethiopian, probably married to her brother, but hard to say on that one. And then he's also going to remove one other. And I'm drawing a blank on that, but doesn't matter. Hold on. The main thing is that he actually acts. He's saying the right things, but he is a product of the system, and I think he cares most about his own power. Let's hope that he begins to care about principle. I'm on the record on the LA Times in an article slamming my own party and Kevin McCarthy. Also did a phone call with one of his people. They weren't happy, but I warned him. Maybe he'll surprise me. He'll step up. He'll do the right thing. But we don't need another Nancy Pelosi. And so it scares me that Kevin McCarthy has the potential to be another Nancy Pelosi. In other words, a complete product of the system that profits off the system. And we've got enough politicians that have been there forever. Mitch McConnell, the turtle, fumbling Biden, Nancy Pelosi, corrupt Nancy Pelosi. I believe she used to have eyebrows when I first started paying attention to politics. Now they're matched right up with her hairline, which is kind of sad. She so feels that she needs to look young. She's so caught up in appearances that she needed that many surgeries and that much Botox. Hey, look, we age. I got wrinkles. I'm not beautiful. I'm okay with that. I earned these wrinkles. But I do think that we reach a certain point where, and politicians particularly, where they've just been there too long. They're no longer in connection to the people. So there's quite a lot of collusion. It is admitted to by now. Bumblin' Biden has had two different press secretaries, Jen Psaki and Jean whatever, the bumbling fool that they hired, largely I think because of her gender orientation and the fact that she's black. And they've both admitted that they communicated with big tech, that they're watching. FBI hasn't admitted it, but the evidence is there. Heck, the mainstream media is just beginning to come up to speed, admitting that the Hunter Biden laptop is real. We were just about 2 weeks ago. I think it was NBC, but it might have been NBC. They looked at it, they had an analysis, and a light bulb went off. And hallelujah, they realized the Hunter laptop was real because they had an analysis. Now, they could have had that in 2020 during the election. Totally available. Totally available. They chose to censor the news. So, can you trust them? I don't think so. You know, they use the excuse that, well, for instance, Twitter's a private company. But then they still want it controlled. Authoritarian? Do they really believe in free speech? Again, we come back to that idea of speech they don't like is hate speech. And then you get labeled, and again, I remember hearing this from the great Rush Limbaugh. I am a Rush baby. Well, I was in high school, but I listened to him before he went national. And there were all these isms, racist, sexist, etc. Only because I have a different idea. So while I believe that free speech allows us to call names, is it wise? Sometimes. Sometimes it's needed. Sometimes I would much prefer a civil discourse. So I believe in people's right to say it, but come on, with that freedom, maybe there should be some good sense and some responsibility. You know, it's okay for a big company like Apple to limit access to the App Store if you don't agree with them. There's no alternative, and there's no will in Congress to take care of that monopoly. It's not just Twitter. They did it to Parler. They've even done it to some left-wing companies that they just kind of had a fight with. And they said, oh, well, you know, if you don't basically bend over and apply your own grease, that you're not getting in our app store. And we've decided that it's okay for somebody like Apple to have a monopoly. I believe that Congress needs to change this. Apple needs to be taken down several pegs. Google, that decides from your search what to show you, and it suppresses things. Twitter, which up till Elon Musk was colluding actively with the government. Facebook, I know they censor. I've been censored again for things that turned out to be completely true, but they called me a conspiracy theorist, and then it turned out to be completely true, like let's see. The jab didn't stop transmission. Absolutely a fact, but that's not what Fauci was saying. And the only person, a few in Congress, but the only person that is on my side that's really making very much noise about I'm going to fix this is Ron DeSantis, saying I'm going to hold those pharmaceutical companies responsible for their lies, for the fact that they did not disclose all of the side effects, which seems to be somewhere around 1 in 800 as a severe adverse effect. It's a big deal because no other vaccine in the history of vaccines was ever in that category. That's kind of crazy. We're going to go ahead and take a break. This is Eric Rollins, the Constitutionalist, here on 1550 KXEX, the best talk in town. I want to thank everybody for listening in. I'm doing my best. I think I'm better as an interviewer, but this is a skill I need to develop. So, if you have a useful suggestion, I do respond. I respond to everybody, but the old lady that is not nice, not polite, generally fairly polite when she comments on Facebook, but, she's also reached out and very much tried on other places where it's a little more hidden. It's not just not polite and not kind, it's rude, vile, poorly thought out, gibberish. I guess it's a sign of success, though. We're going to go ahead and come back. When we do, we're going to start with one of my favorite songs.
Do you want me to use it as the bumper?
Go ahead and use this here on 1550 KXEX, the best talk in town. I really love Tom MacDonald. Now, sometimes he uses profanity where I don't think it's needed, but he has interesting ways of talking about freedom. Now, I don't think he's on the right. I think he's pretty much a libertarian, which I'm okay with, because I think that freedom of speech has enough space that we both fit. If we both genuinely believe in freedom and we're not trying to suppress each other's opinions, it's all good. It's all good. Now, do I think that it would be better if we had a civil society and we generally gave people respect? That we had a difference of opinion and most of the time it didn't come to, irrational yelling? Of constantly labeling somebody because they have a difference in opinion, and the left loves to label. And then they love to passive-aggressively cancel you. Not directly deal with what you said, but instead be spineless cowards. Now, I don't think all the left's that way, but the progressive left is. I have friends that are on the left that I think have legitimate differences of opinion, but we have something in common. We both believe in freedom of speech. We both believe in the First Amendment. Those 5 aspects to the First Amendment. Freedom of speech. That's the one everybody knows. Freedom of religion. Most people know. Freedom of assembly. A little less people know. Freedom to file a grievance against the government and not have to worry that the government is pettily going to come after you. And freedom of assembly. I think that combo makes us a beacon for the world. Now, you combine that with the protection, the built-in protection in the Second Amendment. And I think those aren't our only amendments, but there's a reason why they're the first and the second. And it's why we're a beacon for the world, because you can express your ideas, because you have the freedom to complain about your government. You have the freedom to get together in a group. By the way, we didn't have that during COVID. And that's why I consider COVID to be this great opportunity. Now, why would I think of it as a great opportunity? I think of it as a great opportunity because there was no longer somebody hiding, slowly boiling us in the pot, moving us towards an authoritarian state. And you can argue whether that authoritarian state they want is communism, socialism, a dictatorship. I don't know. Doesn't matter. We're moving towards authoritarianism, but we're also consistently waking people up since COVID. You know, in California, here in Gavanzuela, where we're still under a state of emergency, you could go to a strip club, but you couldn't go to church. For months and months and months. You could go get your alcohol or your pot at the dispensary, but you couldn't go to a bar. And only in those places where we had local control and we had politicians that weren't spineless cowards, or in some cases, it wasn't spineless cowards. They weren't just passing the buck. It was, oh my God, we have power. And, they started rubbing their hands going, whoo-hoo, we can make these sheep obey. I believe I'm sitting in a city just like that, with petty little dictators like Miguel Arias. Not a good man. Don't like him, don't trust him, don't think he's honorable. And that's largely because he doesn't believe in freedom. If businesses tried to express their rights, he did everything he could, because he was the leader of the council at the time, everything he could to use the power of government to retaliate. Well, that's not okay. It's not okay at all. And at the time, we had a really spineless mayor. We've got one slightly less spineless in Jerry Dyer. But before that, the guy was really pitiful. Didn't have a spine. Didn't believe in freedom. Just wanted to hide like a little coward. Dyer's a little better, but I'm not very thrilled with Dyer. But we'll see. There's still some time that maybe he can do some positive things. So I'm trying to keep doors open there. Now, in other places, local government went, we're not doing that. The only reason that Fresno ended up relatively okay was because the district attorney, Lisa Smitkamp, went, I'm not enforcing that. And the sheriff went, I'm not enforcing that. If the Fresno City Council and a whole lot of other blue places, interesting that they all seem to be blue, decided that you needed to wear a mask outdoors. Come on, folks. And there was absolute evidence and studies about masks, not about with COVID-19, but with other versions of COVID that are the same size, about the same transmissibility, and they were all in existence before COVID-19 hit. So we could have looked at that evidence and went, But instead we went, no, we got to be good little liberals. We got to be good little sheep and virtue signal. So the few places where, say I needed food and I had to go into get some food, I had to go to the grocery store. I wore my mask, but I said this mask is as useless as our governor. That's what it said on my mask. And then if anybody wanted to have a conversation, I pulled down my mask to have a conversation. Most people did not. Darn it. Anyway, COVID's the Great Awakening. But, there is an authoritarian paradise. It does exist right now. That is called China. Where if you protest what the government party line, the Communist Party line, the dictator line is, you get arrested. You might disappear. You might go to a re-education camp. If you don't like their COVID rules, because COVID isn't over there, they've been locking you up. Now, interestingly, Apple, who claims to be a leftist company, and claims to care about people, when those protesters started to protest, the government of China decided, well, wait, you're using this airdrop feature on iPhones that allowed you to send messages and almost instantly delete them. So they couldn't then use your phone to tell where you are, what you've been doing. And again, these are largely peaceful protests. Peaceful protests will get you arrested in China. Now, who is it that has praised China? Why I would believe that would be Biden. He talks about China. And you would think that since they're peaceful protests and they should have the right to redress our government, that the Biden administration would say something about this in any sort of even mildly tough way to say, yeah, we stand with freedom or something. Instead, they've been pitiful, spineless cowards. In case you didn't hear me, I said pitiful, spineless cowards. Or, coming back to that whole Hunter Biden idea, maybe he's bought off. Maybe the Chinese have quite a lot on him. The Chinese are known for not really playing fair or nice. So I wonder, what's the truth there? I purposely paused there because I wanted you to think about that. What's the truth? He won't say anything in support that matters. Only the most mild, oh yeah, I guess they have the right to protest. Those people that are protesting were being put in their buildings, in their homes, and then they were welding the doors shut, and a bunch of them died from a fire. Yet we got to talk about how China's our friend? Give me a break. Not at all. So, getting back to Hunter Biden and why this would matter. You know, in the first week, Musk released the Twitter records of collusion, basically the proof. And NBC, ABC, and CBS spent a total of 7 seconds. Can you trust the legacy media? 7 seconds. This is a very real, very huge international story. You can go to all kinds of news sources outside the U.S., and they're eagerly covering it. You can go to news sources inside the U.S., and they tend to be alternate media, and they're covering it. But our trusted big three spent 7 seconds. Now they're spending more time, but they're spending all their time complaining about Elon. So they're hiding a major story, yet there's massive coverage worldwide. You know, the laptop kind of points to Hunter Biden having a career and the Biden family having a career of getting paid for access to power, access to the vice president, access to the senator, and the big guy. The big guy seems to get 10%, and that big guy currently is our president. That's scary. So pay to play in the White House. That means our White House is for sale. And not through traditional means, but literally from foreign governments that have, in the case of China, no interest in freedom, no interest in free speech. There's no such thing as the Second Amendment in China. You don't have a set of rights that protect you. You have the Communist Party that tells you. And if you want to eat, if you want to survive, if you don't want to disappear, if you don't want people in your family to disappear, guess what? You follow the line. So we've got this authoritarian paradise. And every time you hear the Democrats talk about, oh yeah, we love China because they can get things done, that tells you they want that power. Now, I believe that there are also some Republicans that want that same power. Again, we're back to some of those people that have been there forever. I think Mitch McConnell would rather have power in Congress than anything. He's wedded to power. He's done a few positive things with getting the Supreme Court, but otherwise, he's slimy. Now, the woke agenda talks about inclusion, but you better agree with that inclusion, but better agree with their ideas, or else. Now, that would be one thing if they were separate from the government. But the woke essentially controlled and dictated the narrative on social media, particularly Twitter. Now, if they were not connected to the government, that wouldn't matter so much. Now, there are some things, aside from the fact that we're waking up, that I think are a huge deal. The Supreme Court has ruled that there's really not such a thing as hate speech. That's a big deal. So we've got one branch of government that actually believes in free speech. Another thing that's a huge deal is a parallel economy is growing. There are alternate media sources. There are alternate big tech sources that are growing. We haven't dealt with some of the monopolies, and we got to get around Google, but at least there are alternatives. We haven't gotten away around Apple, which doesn't believe in freedom. It's just basically going, big tech, why thank you. Yes, you will do what we say. I'm not quite sure who's the boss in this, but clearly the U.S. government is completely connected. Big tech is completely connected. There's blocking, there's banning, there's shadow banning, there's throttling. There's all different ways that these corporations, this big tech, has to throttle your voice. Now, if the government hadn't given them essentially a free pass, they said you're not liable for anything you do because you're just providing a platform. If that was true and they were truly by themselves, you could just move on to the next company. But if the government is talking to every one of the companies, and again, the information's there. The former Twitter CEO, Jack Dorsey, lied to Congress. Now, maybe other people in Twitter management hid him from that, but he's a pretty bright guy, and I don't think so. He said, oh no, Twitter's not shadow banning. We're not throttling. All the evidence is that's not true. And very clearly, Unwall, the CEO that took over after Jack Dorsey, he eagerly embraced the idea of collusion, suppression. He was one of those leftists that goes, oh, well, we just can't have free speech because, somebody might say something that offends somebody. What a ridiculous idea. We're going to go ahead and take a break. This is Eric Rollins, the Constitutionalist, here on 1550 KXEX, the best talk in town. Another place that concerns me, we'll talk about as soon as we come back, that's the university system. So let's go ahead and come back. This is Eric Rollins, the Constitutionalist, here on 1550 KXEX, the best talk in town. Another place that seems to be in abject fear of free speech would be universities. If you don't like what they have to say, you need a crying closet, you need a safe space. You can only use free speech when you're in the free speech area, and otherwise, I might cry. And yet, people are still sending their kids there and taking this seriously and doing things like donating to colleges and universities. hell with them. Gotta be kidding me. So they only bring one perspective when essentially what they're supposed to be doing is teaching you how to look at issues, how to look at both sides, and then hopefully come to a conclusion yourself. But that's not what they're doing. They're actually in fear of free speech. They believe they need to protect the people from free speech. Well, if this is the people that we're turning out, what are those people going to do when they then go out into society? They're going to feel they need to be protected from free speech, that they need their safe space. So they kind of see all of this as what they're doing is content moderation, not a censorship issue. Now, that's just gaslighting. Now, if I was to use 4-letter words and tell somebody off, that would be out of line. If I was to use a rational argument to discuss something, yet still very clearly tell them off without all of those expletives, without being hateful, without name calling, then I think it's completely in bounds. Now, the name calling has a place, but I do think that, if you were to use 4-letter words, say on social media, that I would be okay with the social media being going, you can't talk about it in that way. You have to be a little classier than that. Well, with freedom comes responsibility. But if government's involved, then they can suppress your free speech. And I guess everything's open. I just would like to think that we're better than that. I'm going to have a couple quotes. George Orwell, and we're kind of in an Orwellian world right now. If liberty means anything at all, it means the right to tell people what they do not want to hear. I'm going to actually say that again. If liberty means anything at all, it means the right to tell people what they do not want to hear. Now, I would hope you would say that in most cases in a polite way. But how have we collectively decided that, hey, I don't really need free speech? Well, a good portion of the country, the progressive left, so 20% of the country, seems to have decided that, no, you don't really have free speech and I need to be protected. And what I need is big government to help me. What happened to the leftists that, like Thomas Jefferson, that believed in limited government, this set of rules called the Constitution, that protected all of our freedoms? What happened? Where'd that go? Wow. So my hope for the future is that we do have a parallel economy. We do have a Supreme Court that seems to mostly value freedom. And I know the left would go, well, no, they took our abortion right. No. Everywhere that eagerly wants an abortion, pretty much every state is a blue state, controlled blue state. And here in Venezuela, heck, you can come here, they'll pay for it. And that's if you're out of state. No, I'm not okay with that because I have real problems with abortion and consider it to be completely devaluing human life, but I guess that's the price of freedom. But I think somewhere in the future, historians are going to look at it and go, really? Really? They could have just prevented the pregnancy, but instead they decided that it should be birth control and it was okay to kill babies. But that shouldn't surprise me because, leftists in Canada have decided that you could be perfectly healthy, just depressed, and now it's okay for you to go in for assisted suicide. I think that's just a reflection of what's happening here, and I hope we don't get to that same place. But yeah, parallel economy. Alternate ways to find your news. I've got a couple suggestions. I love Dr. Steve Turley. Turley talks. I like the liberal hive mind. I like Gavin McInnes. I like Steven Crowder. Ben Shapiro talks too fast, but he's brilliant. Jordan Peterson, I don't think he's a conservative, but he absolutely believes in freedom. And if you want to listen to the intellectual version of it, great place to go. One of the all-time greats, Thomas Sowell, one of the most brilliant men in American politics ever. And he was never elected to anything, but a brilliant thinker. Truly an asset to our society. Victor Davis Hanson, a guy that lives right close. We're within probably 30 miles of where he lives. Brilliant man. Now, he'll give you a little more conservative perspective, but shockingly, I'm okay with that. I've got another quote. Henry Louis Gates, censorship is to art as lynching is to justice. Now think about that. Censorship is to art as lynching is to justice. Now, how can the arena of ideas happen with censorship? How can you have good art if somebody's telling you what art is? Now, I like a lot of art. I also think a lot of it's just pure crap. But I get to make my choice, and that artist gets to make their choice. And I think sometimes, or actually, I would not say sometimes, I would say sometimes their skill allows for something special, but their freedom is the important thing. The freedom to make the choice and create the art that they believe is something special. I think they fail most of the time, yeah, but occasionally, wow, something great. And I think the same thing with free speech. We need to have an open arena of ideas. And one of the places you can find that is with that alternate economy. You have to realize that liberals see us as bad people with bad ideas. I see most liberals, including friends and family, as good people with bad ideas. Different perspective. They think because I don't agree with them, I'm a bad person. I think because they don't agree with me, they're probably good people. They're just confused or wrong. Guess what? There's space for both of us. But it doesn't make me a bad person just simply because I have a different set of values. We need to defend our values. We truly need to go and embrace and educate ourselves about the Constitution. We were granted this amazing document that promotes and preserves freedom. So I would encourage all of you, go to Hillsdale College. Do the simple online course on the Constitution. We have all of these resources in today's world. We have all of these great podcasters. We have all of this alternative media. We are on the brink of something special. We've had easy times. Hard times create strong men and women. I think we're about to see hard times. But hard times, they create those strong people, and those strong people provide a way and a light forward. Join me in being one of those people to provide that way and light forward. I thank you. This is Eric Rollins, the Constitutionalist, here on 1550 KXCX, the best talk in town. Thank you to all of you on social media. Hopefully it was a little better than last time I flew solo, but, it's a work in progress. Merry Christmas to all. That's a wrap.